Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today I just wanted to share with you a game that I played with the guys at the club last night. First time I've had this game out. It's a game I've had for quite a long time. A game that's been out there for a while. I'm sure a number of you may have seen it or played it, and that's Manoeuvre from GMT Games, a battlefield command game, early 19th century warfare, game designed by Horger. This was a 2008 GMT game in a great box. There was also an expansion that came out slightly afterwards called Distant Lands, which added some additional factions, map sheets, etc. to the game, which I'll show you in a moment. In a nutshell, you are playing a game over 4 of these tiles arranged into a square 2 by 2. Which have different terrain items on them, such as towns, forests, fields, hills, stroke mountains, etc. So in effect, you're playing on a 8 by 8 square gridded game area, so quite small footprint. The beauty of the numbers of tiles and the numbers of factions is that you can play more than one game at a time, and last night we actually had 2 games set up. So I was playing one of my chums as the French player. He took the Spanish, and my brother took the Russians against my other pal who took Prussians. This was originally a Napoleonic themed, very loosely themed game, with those factions alongside Austrians, Americans, Ottomans and British. And then the expansion brought in Tokugawa, which in effect is feudal Japan, India, the Queen Dynasty, which is your kind of Chinese stroke era, and Swedes. So you've got 12 overall factions. Each faction has 60 of these little cards, and these are the French ones. They're all color coded, so it's great. You can easily identify whose is what faction on the table, and each of these cards do different things. So there will be unit cards representing the units you have on the table, and there'll also be things like HQ cards or leader cards, like that one there, which is Murat. But you could also have other HQ cards like withdrawal, supply, etc, etc. And you will always have 5 of these cards to begin with, and be able to replenish the 5 of your cards fairly early on in the beginning of your turn. It's an I go, you go system. One player plays all their parts of the phase out, all their phases, and then the next player plays all their phases. Phases are broken down into discard cards in your hand and then replenish up to your 5. Then you do movement. You can only move 1 unit a turn. Yes, that's right, 1 unit a turn. Infantry move 1 square. Cavalry move 1 or 2 squares depending on terrain. You then do combat, and you can only do 1 combat. And combat can be either an assault, an ambush, a volley or a bombardment. You can only do one of those things. And then you have a restoration phase where you can try and restore a unit that maybe been damaged in combat, or you can build a redoubt if you have a redoubt card, or you can try and rally troops, things like that. So there's lots of different elements, but it's a very simple, straightforward game. The system with the squares means that units, literally diagonals are not allowed in any shape or form, so it's horizontals or verticals, nice and straightforward. Volley fire, you've got to be adjacent. Bombardment, normally up to 2 squares. To volley or combat, assault, etc, you just have to be in an adjacent square. There's no stacking here, there's no interpenetration. Everyone has to be on their own squares. So again, very, very simple. You then, for each faction, will have, if I can find the French ones here, you will have unit counters. So each army, it's very simplified, has 8 counters representing their units. And for historical flavour, these are kind of named. So obviously it's a fairly ad hoc force that you're using, but it's giving you a flavour for the period, the type of army that you're playing. But each counter very simply has a name and a number, and that's their combat rating in defence and attack. And you can then kind of multiply those up doing different things. And on the back you have the reduced side with the white strip, and obviously factors are reduced as well. So the French, for example, have a number of line units. They have the Imperial Guard, they have some Swiss, they also then have Guard cavalry, and they have some cuirassiers. So a little bit of historical chrome, but it's a very simple, game. This is not a game. When I say it's not a game for grognards, I'm not sure if that's entirely true. I think there's quite deep thought processes that can go into this game through the cards and the units in terms of how you do things. And the trick is to align units to surround or bring in more units into combat scenarios using your leader cards to really crank up the number of multipliers and additional dice you can roll to enhance your attack or defense values. And very simply, what you're trying to do is remove units off the table. So if, for example, you're attacking and you get a result less than defense, which is very unusual, the attacker would take a hit. Defense, if it's equal, no effect to either side. Greater than defense, but not more than 2 times. Defending unit retreats or takes a hit. If it's 2 times equal or twice the defense total, the attacker chooses to retreat or take a hit on the defender. 3 times the defense total, the defender takes a hit and retreats. 4 times the defending unit is eliminated. So the game rewards attacking, but as the defender you can increase your chances of reducing damage through terrain. So certain terrain has effects on defense. It does also on attack, but predominantly defense. So for example, towns, woods, redoubts, and if you've got a redoubt on a hill, for example, then you can double that up to a +5 on your defense, so quite effective. Hills will give you a bonus for attacking downhill against an adjacent unit. So there's a few elements there where terrain comes into play. The mechanics around bombardment and volleys and then assault and ambushes are slightly different and actually quite unique, and I quite like them. They move the game along very well, but there was enough in there using the cards and thinking about your card deck. You only ever got 5 in your hand, to make you think very carefully about when to use those cards, because if you go all out attacking your turn, use all your cards, you've got nothing to defend yourself with then when the opponent has their turn, because you do not replenish cards until your following turn. So you have to be very, very careful thinking about how you utilize your card stock. The game is won by a number of different things. First of all, you could destroy 5 of your opponent's units. The game comes to an end, you're the winner. The second one, which is more likely to happen, is that you both get to the point, or one of you certainly gets to the point of using all your cards in the deck. When the first person does that, they reshuffle and continue. When the second person uses the last card in their draws the last card in their deck, at the end of that turn, the game ends. And then we're looking at units that are in your opponent's half of the table, which have no enemy in their zone of influence, if you want to call it, i.e. in the horizontal or vertical squares adjacent. and for each one that doesn't, you get 1 victory point, and so there's a victory point condition there as well. In our game, the Prussian-Russian game was very tight. Due to time, it didn't sort of play out to an end, but the Russians scraped a 1 victory point win. But that game probably was still a little bit in the balance. In my game, we actually managed to finish the game through running out the deck, and because at that point the Spanish had lost 4 units but not 5, we had to go to victory point conditions, and the French won purely on 1 victory point, so very close again. But we all learned quite a lot playing the game for the first time. The different factions have different strengths and weaknesses. Yes, the French are very strong. There's no doubt about that. I think probably the British and French are the strongest. But that doesn't mean by any means that they can't be beaten. And when you look at the manifest of the different cards that each faction has, they all bring something slightly different to the party. And the Distant Lands expansion, where we're bringing in some of these other factions that we didn't use last night, bring in some additional rules without over-complicating it. One of the rules we particularly liked was the pursuit roll, which was really interesting when cavalry predominantly caused a unit to either retreat, stroke evade, withdraw, or push them back in combat. They had an opportunity to roll on a pursuit table, depending on the card and the unit, and if they did get the pursuit in, they could still damage the retreating units. So that was quite interesting, and that resulted in some casualties where a unit had taken a point of damage and a retreat, and then the pursuit caused another damage. And of course, each unit can only take 2 hits before it's destroyed. The benefit of that is that the opponent doesn't have time to restore the health of that unit before they're killed off. So some of the cards are supply cards, the leader cards. Supply or a unit card you can use to restore that unit's health back to full strength in the restoration phase. Likewise, some of the leaders have a rally roll, which again, if you roll within a certain number, you can also rally your troops. So leaders were very interesting. Some leader cards will have a command and a combat, so you can either add the combat modifier to the combat, or not both, or you can use the command, which is to bring in adjacent units and add their factors into the melee as well. So again, some interesting command choices. And so I think when they talk about battlefield command, very simplistically, there are some interesting decisions to be made as you play the game. When to use those cards, when to use the leaders, when to use the HQ, additional benefits or the units, or do you hold on to cards? Do you reduce your deck down quickly so you can get a reshuffle if you're after particular cards? Definitely there's a lot of hidden friction in the game, and it's very simple. It reminds me of a very early kind of version of Command and Colours. Yes, when you look at things like this, yes, it's very basic looking. They're not the best, but they're bear in mind how old this game is. These cards are very hard wearing. I put them under plexi because they keep moving about, otherwise that can be a little bit of a downside. The counters themselves, very nice. The artwork's pretty good for their time. Again, I think they're quite nice. And I quite like the little cards. I think again they're nice and easy to follow. As I say, there's 60 of these for every faction, so I've got 12 of these in the box. And units also can use different dice, which is quite interesting. So we've got a D6, D8, D10 system predominantly here. Better quality units might be using D10s. More general quality units may be using D6s, and then you get bits in between. Bombardment's quite interesting. Some of the cards have a You don't have artillery units, but some of the cards for the units have artillery guns on them, and that gives you a bombardment attack if you want to use it. That cannon can also be very helpful in a defensive capacity for that unit, because they normally have pretty good defensive factors. So there's some quite interesting little additional tweaks and things in there to think about when you're playing the game. So overall, we had a very enjoyable experience. It'd be a game that you could play probably on a gridded map with units these days. That was something we did think about. I think it would play quite well in that regard. That could be quite interesting. You could in effect design your own maneuver battle by keeping to the same HQ cards, but maybe having unit cards specific to the units you want to have on the table. That could be quite interesting. So there's a number of ways you could develop this game. But again, this is a game 2008. It's been out there 16 years now, and for its time I think it's very, very good. Yes, it's not an overly complicated game. It won't appeal to everybody, but we enjoyed it. I think it's a great game for a club evening, and we even said, you know, potentially with the number of factions you could have 6 games going on at a time quite easily. So you could be great if you've got a big club and you want to do a little, you could do competitions. This would be a good tournament game. In terms of time length, I mean, we played 1.5 to 2 hours, probably 2 hours finished our first game in its entirety, but I think playing it again we'd probably be looking at 1.5 hours, and I think you could probably get it down even quicker than that after a few games, now more confident with the mechanics. But I hope that's giving you a bit of a flavour of Manoeuvre, our battlefield command game from GMT. Please watch the rest of the video. I'll post some more pictures I took of our games last night, just to sort of show you some of the action shots there. But this one, you probably can pick this up new or on the second-hand market at a reasonable price. And I think it's one worth having a look at. So hope you've enjoyed this little video covering Manoeuvre and my thoughts on the game, and hope to bring you some more material very soon. Have a great weekend.